Aloha kako. I'm Eyre. I'm here representing Maui Pono Network, and we are glad to have you viewing this video today. We are so excited for our guest, and I'll introduce her in a moment. We are here discussing what is called the Wailea 670 project and the upcoming meeting, community meeting that's being held by the Planning Commission at the Malcolm Center this coming Tuesday, March 11th at 9 a.m. So again, this coming Tuesday, March 11th, 9 a.m. You've probably received lots of emails about it. Maui Tomorrow has done a whole campaign on this. It's critical that we have public out there to speak about their concerns about the Wailea 670 project and what's happened as it's gone through the Planning Commission and what the changes that they're considering making on the plan there. So to introduce our guest, I'm so excited we have former council member Kelly King here. She is not only a South Maui resident and has been for a very long time, but she also has the perspective as being someone who has been a public servant and has listened to testimony, has heard people come in, and knows firsthand what effect that has on the decision makers and our government decision makers. And she's also been following this Wailea 670 issue for a long time as well. So we're really excited to have you here today, Kelly. It's our privilege. And will you just kind of give us a little bit of background on how you're coming to this project and what you see this meeting's importance, critical importance being?
Well, thank you for having me, Asia, and it's nice to be here with everybody. Yeah, I've lived in Kihei over 40 years, and I was on the county council for 3 terms, watching some of this same kind of shenanigans happening a lot when I first got on the council. For a couple of terms, we had a more progressive council who actually listened to the community. And this is the important thing, is that the community needs to come out and make itself heard. What's happening with Wailea 670, and this date predates a lot of people who are listening to this, but those of us who have been around for as long as I have understand that this project was never well received by the community. And it was originally proposed at a time when developers were in everybody's pockets, and basically it was who you knew and who you were donating to, and things just got passed willy-nilly. Well, in the 80s and 90s, we weren't really paying attention in South Maui. Kihei was the fastest growing community in the state of Hawaii back in the 80s and 90s, and there was construction, noise, dust everywhere. I was really focused on working with the schools here and helping them get air conditioning because they had to leave their windows open to get air flowing, and it was just noise and dirt flowing in, and a lot of them had really hoarse voices just from having all that dirt in the air. Our house would be covered, most stuff, if you left your windows open, everything would be covered with red dirt every day. And so this is what we remember, but we weren't paying attention. A lot of people like my age were raising young kids back then, and we weren't paying attention, and a lot of these projects slipped through. However, this Wailea 670 in 2008, when it finally got its permits, it actually, there was conditions put on it that were making it more palatable to the community and to the council at the time. I mean, even Mike Victorino said, I'm only passing this because of the 50% affordable housing. And I hope that future councils don't take these conditions out. And now we have future council, fast forward to today, they're trying to take the conditions out. The council definitely heard the community voices. They tried to put this in a committee meeting, and there were 6 hours of testimony. All of 50 plus of us that came and testified, they cut our testimony time. They didn't even want to give us the 3 minutes because they really don't care what we said. And that was even brought up in the meeting that, the 5 of you who are fighting against, who don't want us to be able to speak for 3 minutes, you're the ones that are going to vote against, vote for the conditions going away anyway. And they said, no, 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 we're here to listen. Well, they heard all 50 plus of us, and they still voted the way they voted. So no, they don't care about the community. And that's what's really important about this is we have a shot here to go back to the Planning Commission because the whole process was done just illegally, and they weren't supposed to send it to the council without having a community meeting in our community. So while we have this opportunity, we need to make it clear to this Planning Commission, because not a lot of people showed up at their meeting before they sent it to the council. We need to make it clear to them that we don't want this project to be minimum, below the requirement for affordable housing. We want them to adhere to their conditions of building their water tanks to standard, not substandard. And then we want them to pay the $5 million for the parks, which is probably 7.5 million today if you look at when they made this promise and add interest. We also want them to widen the highway themselves and not leave it up to the Department of Transportation at the state level. So there are all these things that they're trying to get weasel out of. When I was on the State Board of Education, we used to call those weasel words. And so that's what we're watching now is they're trying to weasel out of these conditions. The county council is poised to help them, but if the planning commission hears from the community and does what it's supposed to do and actually votes the way the community wants, it keeps those conditions in, then it would take a supermajority to overturn that. So they would need 6 votes.
Mm.
I believe they only have 5 because there are 4 council members at the time, sitting council members, not ours in Kihei because he always votes with the developers, but there are 4 community members, community-minded members on our council who listen to the public, who actually vote the way the public, and who also understand that this sets a really bad precedent. If you can put conditions on a project and then a few years later, another council can come along and take those away, then you've totally negated any representation of the community. And that's exactly what this council is trying to do.
Well, so I've always wondered with this, why did they wait so long to develop 670 if they had their approvals so long ago?
Well, they never, because they didn't fulfill the conditions. There were conditions on that project that also related to native species that they were supposed to protect, to the cultural sites that they were supposed to identify, and they didn't identify them all. In fact, they swept over a lot of them. There was a water drainage plan that was supposed to have been done and a water quality study, and those weren't not done. So they weren't allowed to go ahead. They had their permits, but they weren't allowed to go ahead. And the community always pushed back against this project because it was never done with community input. And so at one point, and I think it was around the time I got elected to the council, right around 2017, 18, they had been negotiating with Maui Meadows and they put some more concessions in there. And one of them was increasing the buffer zone and just making sure the cultural sites were protected and available to people who needed to visit them, the local Kanaka. So they put some more things back in it, and it actually was a plan that Maui Meadows folks, I was there when they presented it, and the Maui Meadows folks actually liked, they were happy with it. Well, none of those conditions were ever upheld. So that's why, so the community has been constantly pushing back. This is almost since this project first reared its head, I think it's been almost 30 years now. And not that they've had the permits the whole time, but that they've been proposing this. And so, it's about time to either, fish, I'll say fish or get off the boat. Uh, to put it nicely, but if you cannot work with the community, you don't belong here. And the
Right.
people trying to push this have never been people, the developers and their consultants have never been local. They've never lived in South Maui. So they're not people who are going to have to live with the consequences of their actions. And that's why it's really important for those of us who do live here and people who frequent here and people who used to live here need to come forward and say, we don't want this project unless you go back to the original conditions and you at least honor the community that way. We feel very dishonored. We feel like the county council members who voted for this project might as well just be walking up and slapping each one of us in the face. And I've been on that side where I've had to deal with a lot of testimony, and I've watched when we had 2 terms of a more progressive community-minded council. I've watched us change opinions based on what people came and tested and said to us. I don't see any of that. The only opinions I see that the majority of 5 are adhere to are the ones of the developers who have donated to them.
Right. So you're feeling hopeful though with this meeting because it's before the planning commission. So if the planning commission sides with what we're hearing is the majority of the community, then it's going to be harder for the county council to pass through something that's against the community's wishes.
Right. If they stick with the original conditions, then it needs a supermajority is what I've been told to actually change it because they'd be changing it without sending it back to the planning commission.
Right. So this is a really good time for people to testify. They don't want to wait until it ends up before the county council just based on the way that the county council votes according to testimony. They don't act as beholden to the community, and they don't seem as willing to change their mind after hearing testimony. It's like they come into it, their mind's already made up. But the Planning Commission, in your experience, and I know that you know some of the Planning Commission personally, you feel like that they're much more amenable to hearing the community and changing mind based on the community.
Yeah, not all of them, but there might be enough of them that respect the community enough to vote our way and to understand that we are. And see, one of the problems is for a long time, we didn't even have a South Maui member on the Planning Commission.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have one. So, there's a lot of them on there who don't care about South Maui, just quite frankly, they don't live here and they don't commiserate with us. And so I've always been a proponent, by the way, of having our own planning commission just for South Maui. We're
Mm-hmm.
big enough and we have enough going on here that we should have our own planning commission of all South Maui people. That's who should be deciding this. And so we're a little bit hamstrung in that we don't have, and the one person that they did choose is a little more amenable, I think, to developers than I would like. But the problem is that we don't have enough people who understand about the Planning Commission and will come out and testify. And then, of course, they've set this community meeting at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, which is not easy for people to get to. But if you can just log on, stay logged on till you get a chance to. That's the beauty of probably the one good thing we got out of COVID was these virtual meetings, and
Mm-hmm.
people can actually testify virtually. And it's going to be really important for as many people as possible. I mean, I think this is the only item on their agenda, although I haven't seen if there's an updated agenda, but we need to make sure that they're there. They have to put in 6 hours of listening to the community.
So, do you think it's worth it for people who don't live in South Maui but feel that they're personally affected for them to also testify?
Yeah, because a lot of people work in South Maui or, they have visitors who come and are in South Maui, so they're back and forth. They have friends and relatives. I think I mean, if we've got people on the planning commission making decisions who don't live here, then definitely we should have people testifying from all over the island because they've got to make their own area planning commissioners understand how important it is to honor a community plan, honor what was decided on by the conditions that were decided on previously. And I don't think anybody really, in fact, I think former Mayor Victorino was quoted in the paper because he was on the council at the time saying that he didn't really like the project, but he was voting for it because of the affordable housing. And
Mm-hmm.
that he specifically hoped future councils didn't wipe out these conditions, which is exactly what we're seeing now trying to happen.
Well, you gave me a great idea. When I testify, I'll say, like many of you on the commission, I do not live in South Maui.
Yeah,
However,
yes, yes, exactly. Like most of you on the
like
commission.
most of you, like all of you except for one of you,
Yeah.
I do not live in South Maui.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
hopefully
no.
you'll give all of our testimony the credence that you get by
Mm,
being a non-resident making the decisions.
mm, yes, many of us need to do that. So, all of you out there that are watching and listening, no matter where you live on the island or even in the county, you're affected by this. I mean, even our Molokai and Lanai, they come over for sports events. They're often held down in Kihei. This is going to affect traffic. It's going to affect flow. It's going to affect safety. It's going to affect safety because we're always looking for those emergency escape routes. We're looking for ways for ambulances to get down to Kihei. I mean, all these things that are affected negatively by planning without a plan is what I like to call when we get these developments that take into account. They're very selfish. They're like, how can I reap the rewards of this development without making the community better with my presence as a development? So it's a
Yeah,
very
and a lot
selfish
of
way to develop.
I think we really don't have a planning department. We have a building department
Mm,
in the county. The planning department does not plan. In fact, a lot of the policies that were put into the South Maui Community Plan by our CPAC, which does all live in South Maui, or they did at the time when they put the new plan together, all the policies that said you must do this or you're required to do this, those are changed too. We should encourage. It would be nice if they did this, and all the meat was taken out of the policies, and the planning director actually told me that's how you write a policy. And my answer to that is I was a policymaker for many years on the State Board of Education, on the county council. That's not a policy. When you put in fact, we called those weenie words on the board whenever you did something like that because it didn't mean anything. And so it's really
no,
a policy.
no, you need that strong language in there. Well, we really appreciate you being with us today, taking time out of your, I'm sure, busy schedule. And we're grateful for all the service that you've given to the community. I'm sure we're going to see you at the meeting And hopefully we'll
I
see a lot
will,
of
yeah,
people.
I hope to be there in person. And again, I encourage everybody to make sure you testify either in person, which is, it's good for them to see our faces,
Right.
or virtually. And let's demand our 3 minutes this time.
Perfect. I'll be right there with you. All right. Aloha, everyone. Thank you for listening. Go ahead and check out our website if you have more questions about this. You can go to Facebook. Maui Tomorrow Foundation has also put out a lot of information about that. We're going to include that all in the email. So if you have further questions, just email us back, reach out to us on Facebook, and we're happy to answer those. And have a great week. We'll see you next Tuesday, 9 a.m., March 11th. Aloha.
Aloha. Ahui ho.